Sarah Vasquez had always been a soldier. She had fought in the bloodiest battles of the war, survived encounters that should have left her dead, and faced down horrors that defied reason. But as she stood in front of the mirror in her private quarters aboard the Iron Resolve, she realized this battle was different. She rolled up her sleeve, her fingers trembling slightly. The pale vein was still there. Faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable, a ghostly thread running beneath her skin. She traced it absently, feeling the wrongness of it. It didn't hurt, it didn't itch, it didn't do anything. But it was there, a whisper of the Pale Hand's corruption, a reminder that she had come too close to becoming one of them. She exhaled sharply, forcing herself to look away. Focus, Vasquez. You don't have time for this. A sharp beep on her terminal pulled her back to reality. Incoming transmission. Mercer and Kaarix? War room. She sighed, pulling her uniform sleeve down. Whatever was happening to her, it would have to wait. The war room, the Iron Resolve. Elias Mercer stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, his ice-blue eyes narrowed as he studied the holographic display. Beside him, Kaarix loomed, his emerald-green scales catching the dim glow of the room's tactical lighting. His yellow, slit-pupil eyes flicked to Vasquez as she entered, reading her with that unsettling predator's gaze. "You're late," Mercer said without looking up. Vasquez smirked. "Didn't realize we were on a schedule." Kaarix clicked his mandibles. "When war does not wait, neither do we." She took her seat. "All right, what's the crisis of the day?" Mercer pressed a button on the table, and the hologram shifted, displaying a star system Vasquez didn't recognize. "This," Mercer said, "is Praxis 9, a dead system abandoned decades ago after resource depletion." Vasquez frowned. "So what's it to us?" Mercer tapped another command, and the hologram zoomed in, revealing a fleet. Not human, not Krell, but something else. The ships were wrong. Their surfaces were sleek yet organic, shifting with eerie fluidity. Their hulls pulsed with pale light. Vas felt a chill crawl down her spine. "No," Kaarix hailed slowly. "They should not exist." Mercer's voice was cold. "And yet, here they are." The Pale Hand was gone. They had destroyed them. The hive had collapsed. The infection had been purged. Hadn't it? Vasquez clenched her fists. "We killed them. We killed them." Kaarix's voice was grim. "Perhaps we were mistaken." Mercer studied the display. "Either way, they're back, and we need to find out how." The approach Praxis 9 system. The Iron Resolve dropped out of hyperspace, its sleek hull reflecting the dying light of the nearby gas giant. The ghost fleet loomed ahead, drifting in perfect silence. No communications, no life signs. Vasquez stood on the bridge, gripping the railing. The silence was wrong. "I don't like this," she muttered. "Neither do I," Mercer admitted. The ship's AI chimed in. "Scan results complete. No biological life detected." Vasquez frowned. "Then what the hell's flying those ships?" The answer came as the ghost fleet moved. With unnatural synchronicity, the vessels turned, locking onto the Iron Resolve. Energy signatures detected. Incoming hostiles. Vasquez barely had time to react before the first shot hit. The attack. The bridge shook violently as the Iron Resolve took a direct hit. Sparks rained down from overhead panels. Vasquez gritted her teeth. "Return fire!" Railguns roared. Plasma bolts streaked across the void. The Iron Resolve fought back with all the fury of humanity. Yet the ghost fleet didn't break, because they weren't fighting like a fleet. They were fighting like a hive. "This isn't a battle," Mercer muttered, watching the display. "This is a test." Kaarix's mandibles flared. "Then we shall give them their answer." The Iron Resolve banked hard, weaving through incoming fire. But Vasquez barely noticed, because something else was happening. A pulse of pale light rippled from the lead ship, a wave of energy, a frequency. And inside her head, Vasquez heard it. A whisper, a voice, no, many voices, layered atop one another. "We see you, Vasquez." Her breath hitched. "We know you." She staggered, her veins burned. The pale thread beneath her skin glowed. "Vasquez?" Mercer's voice barely cut through the static in her mind. She looked up, dazed. And the lead ship answered. A transmission flickered onto the main display. A face appeared. Hers. A perfect copy. Green eyes, scarred cheek, dark braid, but its lips curled into a too-wide smile, and when it spoke, its voice was hers. "You are us now." Sarah Vasquez stared at the transmission feed, her own face staring back at her from the ghost ship's screen. It wasn't a recording. It wasn't edited footage. It was her. Same dark brown hair, tied back in a tight braid, same scar running down her cheek, same sharp green eyes, but something was off. The expression was too smooth, the smile too wide, the pupils slightly dilated as if something else lurked behind them. "You are us now," the copy whispered, and Vasquez felt it. A sharp, burning pulse shot through her arm, radiating from the pale vein that had haunted her since the destruction of the pale hand hive. Her breath hitched as the burning spread, curling up her neck like unseen fingers trying to grip her from the inside. She clutched the console for support. "Vasquez!" Mercer's voice cut through the static in her head. His gloved hand gripped her shoulder, his ice blue eyes locked onto hers with concern. She shook her head, blinking hard. The pressure eased, the burning subsided, but the whisper remained, lingering in the depths of her mind. "Talk to me," Mercer demanded. Vasquez exhaled sharply. "I'm fine." Mercer didn't buy it. Neither did Kaarix, who was already watching her with those unblinking, predatory yellow eyes. His emerald green scales reflected the flickering emergency lights of the bridge. His mandibles twitched. "You heard something," he said. It wasn't a question. Vasquez swallowed. She couldn't lie. Not to them. She nodded. "Yeah." Her voice came out rougher than she intended. "A whisper? It's still inside me." Mercer clenched his jaw. Kaarix remained silent, his gaze flicking between Vasquez and the thing wearing her face on the screen. The doppelganger tilted its head, the movement eerily fluid. "We are connected. You feel it, don't you? The pull?" Vasquez's fingers twitched near the trigger of her sidearm. "I feel nothing." The copy grinned wider. "Lies. The Ghost Fleet attacks." The transmission cut out, and the Ghost Fleet moved. Multiple hostiles engaging, the ship's AI blared. The iron resolve shook violently as the first impact struck. Sparks rained down from the overhead panels. Tactical displays flickered as the ship's railguns roared in response, lighting up the darkness of space with streaks of burning metal. Vasquez forced herself back into action, moving toward her station. "Weapons hot. Keep firing." The bridge became a blur of rapid commands and flashing red warning lights. Mercer was already in control, barking orders, pushing the crew to respond faster, harder. But the ghost ships, they weren't normal. They didn't evade or maneuver like a regular fleet. They moved like shadows, shifting unnaturally through space, avoiding railgun fire at the last second as if they knew where the shots would land. Vasquez's pulse pounded. "They're reading us," Kaarix growled. "They anticipate, as a hive would." Mercer's expression was grim. "Then we changed the game." He turned toward Vasquez. "Get me a strike team. We're boarding that lead ship." Vasquez blinked. "You're serious?" Mercer's voice was steel. "We can't fight them like this. We need answers." Kaarix's mandibles flared in agreement. "We take the fight to them." Vasquez gritted her teeth. Everything in her told her this was a bad idea, but she nodded. "I'll gear up." Mercer turned to the comms officer. "Vasquez, Kaarix, and I are leading the team. Helm, get us in close." The comms officer hesitated. "Sir, you're boarding a ghost ship." Mercer's eyes were cold as ice. "I know exactly what we're doing. Boarding the unknown." The strike team assembled in the hangar. 10 elite Terran Marines, each in reinforced combat suits, their rifles charged and primed. Zet. Vasquez adjusted her armor, checking her rifle's energy cell. The pulse of the pale vein under her skin was still there, but she forced herself to ignore it. "Focus on the mission." Mercer stood at the front, helmet under one arm, his expression unreadable. Kaarix, looming beside him, adjusted the gauntlet on his wrist. His plasma blades hissed as they ignited for a brief moment before shutting down. The ship AI's voice crackled over the hangar speakers. "Docking sequence complete. Airlock secured." A deep breath. Vasquez clicked her helmet into place. Showtime. The airlock cycled. The door to the ghost ship slid open, and they stepped inside. Inside the hive. The corridor was wrong. The walls were metal, but not just metal. Something else wreathed beneath the surface, shadows shifting, almost as if the ship were breathing. The Marines moved cautiously, weapons raised. Kaarix's mandibles twitched. "This ship is alive." Vasquez's grip tightened around her rifle. "Then let's kill it." They moved deeper inside. The air was thick, humming with an unnatural pulse. The sound was familiar, like the whisper in Vasquez's mind, amplified. And then the lights flickered. Something moved. A shape emerged from the darkness ahead. Tall, skeletal, its limbs too long, its body unfinished. Half-formed armor clung to its frame, its face smooth, featureless, until its surface shifted. and it became hers. A perfect reflection. The copy of Vasquez stepped forward, tilting its head. "You are not ready yet," it whispered in her voice, "but you will be." The Marines opened fire. The fight against shadows. The corridor exploded into chaos. Plasma rounds seared through the air, tearing into the Vasquez copy, only for it to reform, the pale energy knitting its wounds back together. Vasquez swore. "Nothing's hurting it." Kaarix lunged forward, his violet plasma blades igniting as he slashed across the copy's torso. The impact sent it staggering back, but it didn't fall, it morphed, its body shifting and growing. More figures emerged from the walls, copies, Mercer, Kaarix, the Marines. Each of them reflected back, twisted and wrong. Mercer's voice was calm but lethal. "Fall back, regroup." The team pushed backward, forming a defensive line. The copies advanced, their movements too fluid, too inhuman. Vasquez locked eyes with her copy. It smiled. "You are not ready." Then it moved, faster than she could react. A pale hand grabbed her wrist, and for an instant, she was somewhere else. The pale truth, Vasquez saw everything. A network of minds, vast and endless, stretching across the galaxy. A hive unlike anything before. The pale hand had not been destroyed. They had evolved. And in the center of it all, a throne. Not human, not alien, not pale hand, but something new. And it turned, looking straight at her. "You are the key." Vasquez wasn't on the ghost ship anymore. She was somewhere else. A vast, endless space stretched around her, a network of shifting light and darkness. It pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, vast threads of pale energy weaving through it like veins. Shapes moved within the distance, things half-formed, whispering, waiting. And at the center of it all, a throne. It was massive, made of the same pale material as the ships, but it didn't feel like stone or metal. It breathed, shifting with each pulse of energy. The throne's base stretched out like living roots, merging into the hive's endless consciousness. And sitting upon it, a queen. Not a pale hand, not human. Not anything Vasquez had ever seen before. She was tall, draped in shimmering bone-like armor that seemed to flow like liquid. Her face was almost human, almost, but too perfect, too symmetrical, like something designed rather than born. Her skin was a luminous silver white, her eyes bottomless pools of black. She had no mouth, and yet when she spoke, Vasquez felt her words in her bones. "You do not belong to them." Vasquez's body tensed, every muscle screaming for her to move, but she couldn't. She was trapped in this space, frozen between realities. The queen tilted her head, studying her like an insect under glass. "You were never meant to be human." A chill ran through Vasquez's spine. "The hell does that mean?" she growled. The queen rose from her throne, moving with an unnatural grace. Her pale, flowing armor shifted with her, almost as if it was alive. "You carry the seed of Ascension. You have felt it." Vasquez clenched her fists. She knew what the queen was talking about. The pale vein, the whispers in her head, the way the ghost fleet called to her. The queen stepped closer, raising a hand. Vasquez felt the energy ripple through her body, pulling at something inside her. "You are the key," the queen whispered. Vasquez's mind flooded with visions. A galaxy not conquered, but transformed. Not through war, through assimilation. She saw humans, but not as they were now. They were more, stronger, faster, their minds linked to something greater. They were not slaves, not victims. They were something beyond human. And in the center of it all, herself, crowned, ascended queen. "No," Vasquez whispered, forcing herself to move, to step back. The queen's black eyes glowed. "You have already begun." The real world, the ghost ship. A voice? Mercer's. She slammed back into reality, gasping for air. Her body felt wrong, as if she had just been torn from another universe. She was back on the ghost ship, her rifle still in hand. Mercer had her by the shoulder, shaking her. Around them, the battle still raged. Kaarix fought back-to-back with the Marines, his plasma blades a blur as they clashed against the pale hand doppelgangers. Vasquez's vision swam, her body vibrating with some unnatural energy. She looked down. Her veins were glowing, not just faintly, brightly, like she was becoming something else. Her breath hitched. "No, no, no, no." She grabbed her arm, digging her fingers into the skin. Mercer saw it too. His face twisted with something rare, fear. "Vasquez, what the hell is happening to you?" Before she could answer, the whisper came again, stronger, from inside her. "Embrace it," she screamed. The breaking point, the entire ship reacted. The walls pulsed, the doppelgangers stopped fighting. All of them turned, their hollow eyes locked onto Vasquez. Then, in unison. They knelt. Mercer, Kaarix, and the surviving Marines stood frozen, weapons still raised, panting. But Vasquez couldn't breathe. She could feel them. All of them. Not just in the room, beyond. The fleet, the hive. She wasn't hearing whispers anymore. She was hearing commands, and she understood them. The pale hand hadn't tried to destroy her. They hadn't even tried to turn her. They had been waiting. Because she wasn't just an infection. She was an heir. She was meant to become them. A cold, paralyzing fear gripped her chest. "No," she whispered, her hands shaking. "I am not one of you." The Queen's voice echoed in her skull, gentle, almost comforting. "Not yet." Vasquez staggered back. Then she saw Mercer. His gun was aimed at her. His ice-blue eyes were filled with horrified realization. Kaarix stood at his side, plasma blades still glowing. He was tense, waiting, watching her, like she was the enemy. Her blood turned to ice. "Mercer," she started. "Tell me you're still you, Vasquez," Mercer said, his voice eerily calm. "Because I'm looking at you right now, and I don't know if I believe that anymore." Her heart pounded. She took a step forward. Mercer's trigger finger twitched. Kaarix's voice rumbled. "She is changing." Vasquez clenched her fists, fighting back the panic. "I'm not one of them." Mercer's gaze was unreadable. "Then prove it." She could hear the unspoken words. "Or I'll put you down before you become something I have to kill." She had to do something. Now. She turned, her pulse sinking with the hives, feeling it stretch outward. And she did something she never should have been able to do. She commanded it, a single thought. "Let us go." And the entire ghost fleet obeyed. The ship trembled. The doppelgangers vanished, their forms melting back into the walls. The walls stopped breathing. The pale energy receded. A corridor opened, leading straight back to their boarding craft. The hive was letting them leave. Vasquez turned back to Mercer and Kaarix. They were both staring at her like she had just become something terrifying. Because she had. Vasquez took a shaky breath. "Let's go." The aftermath. Aboard the Iron Resolve. The silence on the bridge was suffocating. The ghost fleet had vanished. The entire system had gone dark. No trace of the pale hand remained. Mercer sat across from Vasquez in the war room. His gun was holstered, but his posture was still rigid. Vasquez looked down at her hand. The pale vein was still there. But now, she could feel it. It wasn't just a remnant of the infection. It was part of her, and worse. She wasn't sure if she wanted to get rid of it anymore. Mercer exhaled. "You controlled them." Vasquez met his gaze. "I don't know how." Silence. Then Mercer leaned forward, his ice-blue eyes hard as steel. "You just became the most dangerous thing in the galaxy, Vasquez." A chill ran down her spine. Because she already knew. And the worst part? She wasn't sure if she was still fighting them, or if she was becoming them. Sarah Vasquez sat in the war room of the Iron Resolve, her fingers curled into fists. The pale vein running under her skin pulsed in sync with something unseen, something distant, yet impossibly close. Across from her, Elias Mercer's expression was unreadable. His ice-blue eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her stomach knot. Kaarix loomed nearby, silent but tense, his mandibles twitching. The truth had been laid bare. The pale hand was not gone. They had evolved. They had waited. And now, Vasquez was the key to something much bigger than herself. "You controlled them," Mercer said at last, his voice barely above a whisper. Vasquez nodded. "Yeah." Kaarix's yellow slit pupil eyes narrowed. "And you let us go." The unspoken words hung between them. You didn't have to. She had given the order, and the pale hand had obeyed. Mercer leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "So tell me, Vasquez, are you still you?" Silence. She wanted to say yes, wanted to believe it, but the whispers hadn't stopped. Somewhere in the vast network of the Pale Hand's hive mind, the Pale Queen was waiting, watching. "You are the key," she had said, and Vasquez had felt it. The connection. The pull. She could command them. But what if one day she couldn't stop? Vasquez inhaled sharply. "I don't know." Mercer's jaw tightened. His hand hovered near his sidearm, not out of immediate threat, but out of fear. She had fought beside him for years, through battle after battle. But this was something different, something unknown. Kaarix's deep voice broke the silence. "You have two choices." Vasquez met his gaze. The Krell warrior's emerald green scales shimmered under the dim lighting, his mandibles shifting in contemplation. "You sever the link," he said, "or you embrace it." A chill ran through her. "And if I can't sever it?" Vasquez asked, though she already knew the answer. Kaarix's plasma gauntlet flickered to life, a quick, clean death. Mercer didn't flinch. He didn't argue, because if she lost control, they would have to stop her. Vasquez exhaled slowly, forcing herself to think. She wasn't ready to die, not yet. And she wasn't ready to become one of them either. But maybe there was another way. She stood abruptly. I need to go back. Mercer stiffened. The hell you do? I need to understand what's happening to me, Vasquez shot back. The Pale Hand didn't just survive, they adapted. And now, I'm connected to them. If we don't figure out how, we're fighting blind. Mercer's fingers curled against the tabletop. And what if you don't come back? She hesitated. Then you'll know your answer. Kaarix studied her, then exchanged a glance with Mercer. This is a dangerous path, Vasquez. She smirked grimly. When has it ever not been? Mercer exhaled through his nose, rubbing his temples. Then he straightened. You're not going alone. She blinked. You want to come? Mercer scowled. I want to put a bullet in the Pale Queen's head and end this before it spreads any further. Kaarix crossed his arms. If we move against the hive, we must do so with caution. We may be walking into a trap. Vasquez nodded. Probably. Mercer shook his head, muttering a curse. Then he straightened. Then we prepare. Vasquez flexed her fingers, feeling the faint hum of the hive's presence still lingering in her mind. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And if she had to walk into the darkness to find the truth, so be it. Because if the Pale Hand thought they could claim her, they were dead wrong.